Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel Psych E-Pathshala, your study companion to learn psychology online. In this video, we will be discussing about the psychology of memory. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever we upload next. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and share this video with your friends. So let us start discussing about memory. Memory was primarily defined by Stout as the ideal revival of information from the storage of our mind. On the other hand, Ribon defined memory as the power that we have to store the information regarding experiences we have and then bring them to our consciousness after the experience has already occurred. Memory can be defined as the cognitive process of storing and retrieving information. If we further describe the process of memory, we can see that there are three particular stages. The first stage is encoding, the second stage is storage, and the third stage is retrieval. Now let us discuss these three stages in detail. In the stage of encoding, sensory information from the environment is encoded through our sense organs, and a lot of information that is coming from the environment is attended through selective attention. That means we cannot store all the information that we receive from the environment. There needs to be a selection procedure that determines what information will be stored in our brain and what information will be forgotten. After this stage, the information goes to the storage. In this stage, the information is stored in our brain. This storage has different capacities, which we will be learning about in further theories. In the third stage, the information that is stored in our brain is retrieved as per the need of the situation. For example, when we learn about the alphabets in our earlier days, we first encode the information. We learn from A to Z and then we store the information in our brain. And later, when the information is needed, when we are asked to reproduce the information or retrieve the information, then we retrieve the information from our brain, and that procedure is known as retrieval. Now we will be discussing about the theories of memory. The first theory that we will be discussing about is the Multistore Model given by Wolff and Norman in 1965. They primarily said that there are two stages of memory, primary memory and secondary memory. But this idea was not original of their own. Their concept of primary memory and secondary memory was adopted from William James in 1890. If we put the Wolff and Norman theory of multi-store model of memory in a diagram to understand, the diagram would seem somewhat like this, where the sensory information first comes into the primary memory, which has a very limited capacity. As more information comes in, most of the information gets displaced or forgotten. Therefore, due to the limited capacity of primary memory, it cannot hold on to much information. To hold on to that information, the information is rehearsed, and with rehearsal, the information goes into the short-term store of the primary memory. The more an information is rehearsed, the information passes from primary memory to the long-term storage of the secondary memory, which has unlimited capacities to store information. This was the primary multi-store model of memory by Wolff and Norman, 1965. The next theory that we will be discussing is information processing or three-stage model by Atkinson and Shiffrin, 1968. Atkinson and Shiffrin developed on the theory of multi-store model. They broke down the memory process in three distinct stages. Number one is sensory register, number two is short-term memory, and number three is long-term memory. Sensory register has unlimited capacity to store or hold information. Whatever we see, hear or experience in our environment is encoded by our sense organs and encoded in the sensory register. Therefore, the information or the input comes from the environment and gets encoded in the sensory register. The sensory register has unlimited capacity, as we have already said, but it can hold on to the information for a very brief period of time. Sperling was the first one to do some experiment on the capacity or the duration of sensory register. He used a device called tachistoscope to present visual information or visual cues to an individual for a very brief period of time. And from that experiment, he concluded that visual information can stay in our sensory register for 1 second. This information, this visual information that is stored in our sensory register was termed as the iconic memory. Later, Broadbent and Trisman did similar experiment regarding the auditory information, and from their experiment, they found that auditory information can stay in the sensory register for 3 to 4 seconds. This information that was held in the sensory register was known as echoic memory. If the information in the sensory register is not given enough attention, the information is lost forever. If that information is given attention, the information goes from sensory register to the short-term memory of our mind. Ebbinghaus and Wundt initially did their experiments on the short-term memory and concluded that short-term memory can hold on to the information for about 20 seconds, and they can hold on up to 4 to 5 information or items of information in short-term memory. Later, Miller did his own experiments and concluded that the short-term memory can hold on to 7 plus minus 2 items of information in our mind. This number was known as the magical number. According to Miller, the 7 plus minus 2 number of items that can be stored in the short-term memory is not only the isolated number of items that can be stored in our short-term memory. He believed that information that are associated with each other can form chunks of information that can also be considered as single unit of information that can be stored in the short-term memory. He believed that by chunking, we can hold on to more number of information that are associated with each other in the short-term memory for longer times. For example, if we are given a mobile number to remember, the mobile number has 10 individual units or numbers to be remembered or stored in our memory. But most of us chunk those numbers in associative manner, like 3, 3, 4 or 5 pairs of numbers. That is how we can store the number of information in our short-term memory very easily. He also concluded that the short-term memory can hold on to the information for almost 30 seconds if it is not rehearsed. The duration of short-term memory was experimented by the Brown-Peterson technique, where an individual was given a number of items or information to study, and later they were given a filler task, a task that was completely unrelated to the memorization of those items. And following that task, after different periods of time, they were asked to recall the information they have studied. It was observed that after the 30-second mark, the information was completely lost from the short-term memory. From that, it was concluded that the short-term memory can hold on to the information for a very brief period of time, that is 30 seconds. If we want to hold on to the information for more than 30 seconds, the process that is required is known as rehearsal, where the information is actively repeated in our short-term memory or in our mind to keep it in the short-term memory store. Rehearsal is a very important process in storing the information for long term. Rehearsal is a very important process in memorization techniques. According to the Atkinson Shiffrin Model, information that is stored in the short-term memory, when rehearsed for a longer period of time, can passively go into the long-term memory. The active procedure of rehearsal passively stores the information in the long-term memory to be recalled later. If any information is not rehearsed in the short-term memory, that information is lost from there forever, and that is how the forgetting occurs. Therefore, it can be said that the forgetting has occurred due to lack of encoding. From long-term memory, the information is again restored to the short-term memory through the process of retrieval, when we actively try to recall or reproduce any information from our long-term store. If we cannot find any information or we cannot retrieve any information from our long-term memory, then it is considered that that information is also forgotten, which is a result of retrieval failure. As we have learned that in sensory register, information is stored in iconic form or echoic form. In short-term memory, the information is stored in acoustic form or semantic form. According to Schulman, whenever we hear a word or hear something, we try to repeat it verbally in our mind. That is, we try to rehearse that information in our short-term memory for a longer period of time. That verbal piece of information that we are constantly repeating or rehearsing in our mind is there in an acoustic. Along with that, whenever we are repeating that word or rehearsing that word in our mind or in our short-term memory, we try to understand the meaning of it as well. That is when the information is coded semantically. When the information is transformed from short-term memory to long-term memory, that information is also encoded in long-term memory in acoustically similar, acoustically dissimilar, semantically similar and semantically dissimilar form. Like, for example, the term batch, B-A-T-C-H, batch, and the word badge, B-A-D-G-E, sounds similar. They are acoustically similar, but we try to encode them in different manner. So we encode acoustically similar items in our long-term memory. Also, the term batch, B-A-T-C-H, is different from the word orange. Therefore, we encode the two words differently in our long-term memory. However, the word little and the word small are semantically similar. They have different sounds, but they have similar meaning. That is why they are encoded together or stored together in the long-term memory. Besides this kind of encoding, the long-term memory stores visual information like pictures and images, olfactory information like smells of things, gustatory information like taste of particular food items, and tactual sensations as well. Now we will be discussing about the working memory. In the information processing model or the three-stage model by Atkinson and Shiffrin, the short-term memory is considered to be a passive store of information, where the information goes from the sensory register to short-term memory and it is only repeated or rehearsed. However, in 1986, Baddeley and Hitch said that the short-term memory is not just a passive store of information, rather the information that goes to short-term memory is manipulated or altered in various ways. They said the short-term memory is more like a workbench where information is tailored and altered and manipulated at the will of the person. That is why they renamed short-term memory as working memory. According to them, the working memory has three distinct functions: visuospatial sketchpad, phonological loop, and central executive. Whatever visual information that we gather, we try to manipulate or alter or draw our own inferences on that visual information. That task is done by the visuospatial sketchpad. Whenever we receive auditory information, that information is repeated or rehearsed in our mind, and several other processes are done with that auditory information. That function is done in the phonological loop. Apart from that, the tasks like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and other creative functioning are done by the central executive. Now let us discuss about different types of long-term memory given by Tulving. According to Tulving, the long-term memory has two types. One major type of long-term memory is the declarative memory. The declarative memory can store the factual information, the informations regarding the world, the facts or events. For example, if we ask the question, when did India get its independence? The answer that we give comes from the declarative memory. The declarative memory can be of two types, episodic and semantic. The episodic memory is actually the account of information in a series. Like whenever we ask the question, what happened during the independence era in India, we will recall the information or the events that occurred during the British period till the day of Indian independence in a serial manner. That will be the episodic memory of the events that we have studied in our books. From our own experience, if we ask ourselves what happened the day before yesterday and we try to recall the events from the morning to night in a serial manner, that information will come from our episodic store of memory. In the semantic memory, the information about meaning of words or situations or objects is stored. Like if we ask the meaning of a book or a library, the definition or the explanation that we will give about that particular word book or library comes from the semantic store of our long-term memory. Next, the procedural memory is not a verbal memory, rather it is a non-verbal memory which is about the memory of several different skills that we have. For example, if you have learned how to ride a bicycle, it is very difficult to explain the process in verbal terms. You cannot explain how you can ride a bicycle verbally, but whenever you are given a bicycle and you are asked to ride it, you will easily know how to ride that bicycle by stepping on the pedals and maneuvering through the streets. So that kind of memory will be considered as the procedural memory. Besides the classification of long-term memory by Tulving, there are other forms of LTM as well given by different psychologists. The first type will be called the autobiographical memory. Autobiographical memory is a form of episodic memory that is completely personal to an individual. Whenever we are asked to recall any kind of information that is related to our past or our life, that kind of information or memory is considered as the autobiographical memory. Next, flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memory is also a form of declarative memory, but that memory is formed in a emotionally charged or in an emotionally significant situation. For example, if you ask an individual where they were when the incident of 9/11 or the attack on World Trade Center in America happened, they will be able to recall the exact moment or the situation where they were when they heard the news. This particular memory formed in a very sensitive point of time in our life is known as the flashbulb memory. Next, photographic memory. Photographic memory can be explained with an example. If we give an individual a photograph or a particular page of a book and they see that page or photograph just once and later they can recall that page or the photograph exactly just the way it was, that memory will be known as the photographic memory. Next, implicit memory. Implicit memory is a form of memory that we cannot express verbally or that is encoded in us unconsciously. Implicit memory is a form of procedural memory. How to ride a bicycle, how to cook, or the information that we have stored in our mind that we cannot verbally express, like certain feelings or certain emotion that we have. Next, explicit memory. Explicit memory is all the information in our memory store that we can verbally express or explain to others. To verify the existence of multistore model or the different stores in our memory, Murdoch did an experiment which was known as the serial position effect. In his experiment, he memorized several nonsense syllables, and after a period of time or a period of non-interfering task, he tried to recall them. He found that the words or the syllables that he learned at the beginning of the list were remembered very accurately, and the words that he learned at the end of the list were remembered very accurately. The words that were in between were mostly forgotten. From this experiment, he said that the primary numbers were remembered because due to the rehearsal while learning the list, they went to the long-term store of the memory. And the words that were at the end of the list were remembered because they were the residues in our short-term memory. This phenomena is known as the primacy effect and the recency effect, which means whenever we are learning a task or learning an item, the things that we learn at the beginning are remembered well, and the things that we learn at the end of the task are remembered very well. This serial position effect was then put into a curve known as the serial position curve to demonstrate the phenomena by Glanzer and Kunitz. Next, the theory that we will be discussing is known as the levels of processing theory by Craik and Lockhart. They proposed this theory in the year 1972. This theory was somewhat different from the stage theories that was previously discussed. According to them, the information that we store in our memory is not a passive method of storing them. Rather, we do it in an active manner, and at what depth the information has been processed determines if the information will be stored in our memory for a long time or it will be forgotten in a very short period. According to them, there are three levels of processing in memorization: the shallow or physical level, the intermediate or phonetic level, and the deep or semantic level. For example, if we consider this word and a child is given this word, the shallow level processing will be looking at the shapes of these letters, the curvature, the peak, and the horizontal and vertical line of these letters. This is the shallow level or physical level of processing. Remember, when a child is taught how to write the alphabets in English, they first concentrate on the size, shape, and the curvature of the letters. If a child is only taught the signs and the shape of the letters, it will be easily forgotten by them. Next, in intermediate or phonetic level, if we teach that child the phonetic pronunciation of these particular letters, like for the first letter is C, the second letter is A, and the third letter is T, and the entire word sounds cat, the child will be able to remember it for a longer period of time, and he will be able to understand that this particular organization of these letters sounds cat. But only these information will be temporary and will not be stored for a longer period of time if this word is not associated with a meaning. That is when the deep and semantic level of processing comes in play. If this word is associated with the picture or image of a cat, then the child will be able to remember it more easily. And when the child will see this word, the image or the meaning of this particular word will come into their mind. Inversely, whenever a child sees the animal cat, he or she will be able to recollect the word cat, cat. This is how the different levels of processing helps us to remember a particular item or event. According to Craik and Lockhart, this happens in all kinds of situations. Whenever we experience an event or situation, we first identify the physical characteristics like where it happened, when it happened, and then we understand the kind of sounds or the environmental cues that were present there, and next we assign different kinds of meaning to the events or experiences, and that is how the entire event or situation is stored in our memory. In the previous theory that we just learned, in the levels of processing, according to Craik and Lockhart, the information going from the shallow level to the deep level of the processing depends on what kind of rehearsal we are doing. Rehearsal is a very important part of the memorization process, and according to Craik and Watkins, the rehearsal can be of two types. One is maintenance rehearsal and another one is elaborative rehearsal. In maintenance rehearsal, whatever information we are getting from the environment is constantly repeated in a passive manner. It is rehearsed just the way we learnt it. And in elaborative rehearsal, the information is processed and additional information is added to it from the environment. For example, if we are memorizing the answer to a particular question for the exam situation and then we are going to reproduce it in the examination hall, the kind of memorization or the kind of rehearsal we do is called maintenance rehearsal. We are just repeating whatever we have read and we are assimilating it in our memory. If we are doing elaborative rehearsal, we will also try to accumulate other information from other types of resources to understand the main concept that is behind that particular question or subject or topic. In elaborative rehearsal, the meaning of the information may change or additional information may be incorporated in the original information. The next theory that we will be discussing is known as the parallel distributed processing by McClelland and Rumehart. This was a cognitive approach to studying the memory process. So far, the theories that we discussed about the process of memory has been discussed in a serial manner, like the one process occurs after another. In parallel distributed processing by McClelland and Rumehart, it was first advocated that the memorization process does not occur serially, rather a lot of processes occur simultaneously and in a parallel manner. According to this theory, at the input level, several processes or inputs are encoded in a parallel manner and there are several hidden processes that are occurring at the simultaneous time. The information from all the inputs go to the hidden processes simultaneously and processed together. From those hidden processings, the information or the output goes to the output level, and that is when the information is stored in our memory. As the cognitive processes occur simultaneously and have interconnection, this theory is also known as the model of connectionism. According to this theory, there is not a particular cognitive action that is happening at one point of time. Rather, several cognitive actions are taking place in our brain at the same time. And as the memorization process is happening in a network model, the network connection is distributed through the entire brain through a network of neurons and not restricted to a particular area in the brain. That is why the memory cannot be located into a particular area of the brain, rather it is distributed in the entire brain region. What kind of memory will be stored and what kind of memory will not be stored in our brain? It depends on what kind of network is strengthened through rehearsal or practice and what kind of network is not strengthened by rehearsal. As the connections are dynamic in nature, despite similar experiences, the responses that we produce in situation are always different. Also, whenever we get some partial information or incomplete information about a particular situation or an event, due to this parallel processing, the gaps in between the information is filled by several other processes. Therefore, whenever we get some incorrect, partial or incomplete information about a situation or a particular event, the basic tendency is to formulate different outcomes or possibilities regarding the situation and store them in our mind in a meaningful way.